The eyes of the world were on Britain this weekend.
The coronation, a day fit for a king.
This coronation is something that we haven't seen. The last one was 70 years ago. This really marks the occasion, and this is a new era after Queen Elizabeth.
We flew all the way over here from the United States. This was monumental.
The coronation of King Charles III was watched by around 18 million people here in the UK, by far and away the biggest draw on television that day. There were also thousands of street parties up and down the country, which was given an extra bank holiday in honour of the new king. Of course, not everyone was celebrating. Republicans and quite a few others thought it was all a big waste of time and money.
God save the king!
God save the king! The coronation of a British monarch is a rare thing. No one under 70 has ever seen one. The last coronation of Queen Elizabeth II was all the way back in June 1953. It was the first to be televised.
I here present unto you Queen Elizabeth.
Her Majesty was just 27 years old when she was crowned. King Charles, though, is nearly half a century older at 74. His wife, the new Queen, 75. Did the ceremony feel less special as a result? Probably. The TV viewing figures averaged 18 million in the UK, hitting about 20 million at their peak. Great numbers, but that was significantly lower than the 27 million people who tuned in to watch Queen Elizabeth's coronation. And that was when Britain had a much smaller population. Given that Charles was already king, some asked why it was necessary to spend money on a coronation at all.
Not my king! Not my king! Not my king! Not my king!
As if in anticipation of the question, the royal website explained it is a ceremony marking the formal investiture of a monarch with regal power. A very expensive ceremony, though. Some estimates range between $100 and $250 million. A lot of that down to security, trying to protect people from terrorists. It was expensive but magnificent. Coronations have taken place at Westminster Abbey for nearly 1,000 years, since King Harold in 1066, probably. Some of the traditions of this ancient Christian ceremony continue to this day. The king swears an oath on the Bible to govern with justice and mercy. He's then anointed with holy oil, consecrated in Jerusalem and poured from a 700-year-old spoon. Some things have changed, though. The politician Penny Mordaunt became the first woman to carry the sword of state in front of the king. Some said she looked a bit like King Henry VIII's second wife, Anne Boleyn. Not the one from the Channel 5 miniseries, but the real one from all those old oil paintings. Another first was Rishi Sunak reading from the Bible, as prime ministers have done for years at the coronation. Britain's first non-white leader described it as a proud expression of our history, culture and traditions, which still struck some as odd, given that he's a Hindu who took his oath on the Hindu holy book, the Bhagavad Gita.
Therefore, should we have, for example, heathens reading the epistles? Is it appropriate for a heathen prime minister to be reading a gospel reading?
But that perhaps misses the point. King Charles wanted his coronation to acknowledge Britain's ethnic and religious minorities too, which is why he prayed aloud that I may be a blessing to all thy children of every faith and conviction.
So help me God.
Such considerations, an attempt to modernise, didn't impress the anti-monarchists in Trafalgar Square, though.
Not my king!
In addition to all this serious stuff, there was quite a bit of gossip too. Prince Harry played no formal role in the ceremony and was relegated to the third row, with other C-listers no one's ever heard of. He was also supposedly caught by a lip reader, allegedly saying, "I'm fed up with the way they treat me." Another lip reader from Sky News supposedly caught King Charles complaining about delays just before the coronation. "We can never be on time," he reportedly says. "Yes, this is a negative. There's always something. This is boring." Still others found it difficult to accept that Camilla had become Queen Camilla rather than Queen Consort. For them, there will only ever be one, the Queen, and no one can replace her. Other nostalgic and imaginative types wondered what it would have been like if Princess Di was still around. She would have attended, said her former butler.
I think she would have looked stunning. She would have outshone everyone.
While some may have been thinking of Princess Diana, it was up to her son, Prince William, to look to the future.
As your liege man of life and limb, so help me God.
Okay, let's bring in our guest now. And Jenny Bond is a royal correspondent who has met several royals over the years, including King Charles, Princess Diana, and the late Queen. We also have Paul Burrell, Princess Diana's former butler, a man she once described as her rock. And finally, we have Kathy Lett, an Australian-British author who's a friend of Queen Camilla. Okay, welcome to all three of you. Jenny, may I start with you? Trying to gauge the interest amongst the British population for the coronation. Around 18 million on average watching, up to 20 million at the peak, but well short of Queen Elizabeth II's coronation with 27 million people watching. Now, does this mean that the British public is now less interested in seeing these sorts of occasions?
Well, I've always taken the view you can do whatever you want with statistics, actually. But back in 1953, television was a very new medium. People went out and bought their sets specifically for the coronation, and people gathered around, families gathered around to watch it. And it was a huge event. This was also a huge event, but frankly, the way we watch television these days is so different. You know, you might watch it through social media, you might watch it on catch up. So a lot more opportunity. I think those figures will go up. I think that there is apathy amongst the younger generation about the monarchy, but that's always been the case. 18 to 24-year-olds have always said, oh, I'm indifferent to it. I couldn't care less. I'm going to get on with my life. And they get on with their life. And then as they get on with their life, generally, each generation thinks, oh, it's not so bad, is it? Actually, quite like the status quo, quite like the Queen or King or whatever. And those statistics change. So I think there was still a huge amount of interest in the UK and through the Commonwealth.
Probably true to say that. Look at what happened to Channel 4. They tried to replay Johnny English at the same time as the coronation, and they managed to get 138,000 viewers, so a bit of a flop for them. What do you think, Paul? Do you think the country is still as interested in the royal family as it ever was?
Well, I think since the passing of our late Queen, things have changed a little bit. And had this coronation been William and Kate's coronation, I think it would have been a totally different story. I think people would have been dancing in the streets and having a big party. But because it's Charles and Camilla, they do have a lot of baggage, and we have heard a lot of history over the years from them. I think people are a little bit muted for this coronation. Listen, the royal family are only there for as long as the people want them to be there, and they have to become relevant to the people today, especially with the cost of living crisis. And the coronation cost £100 million. It's a tough pill for some people to swallow.
Indeed.
I understand that. I understand that people have an opinion. I am a royalist. I want it to continue. I want to cross the bridge with King Charles and Queen Camilla because I want King William and Queen Catherine on the throne.
Just the risk of sounding a bit ageist, Paul, but do you think them being in their mid-70s took the shine off it a bit?
I think that is a problem for Charles and Camilla to be relative to the people of our country today. It's going to be a very tough journey for them, having the Queen's reign for 70 years and having such big shoes to fill. I just think that, you know, it's going to be an uphill struggle. But with the help of William and Kate and their young children, I think we are going to get across that bridge, and we are going to see Diana's son as King of the United Kingdom.
Kathy, I know that you're a big royalist. In your articles, you said you were watching it in your tiara and your pajamas. Perhaps a bit too much information, but is there a difference between you and, say, your son who went down to protest?
Well, first of all, I'm not actually a royalist. I am for Australia, I think we should be a republic for sure. But in Britain, you know, it's wonderful to watch the pomp and the pageantry. I mean, I think if the Brits could choose their own Olympic categories in which they'd win gold, it'd be queuing, quipping, pomping, and pageantrying, because nobody does it better. So it was a great fun to watch it. And why I was wearing my tiara, because in Australia we have inverted snobbery. If you can trace yourself back to the convict stock, that makes you Antipodean royalty. So the first time I met Prince Charles, when he was still Prince, you know, I told him that. I said, you know, my ancestors went out on the first and second fleet, so I am the creme de la creme from one aristocrat to another, g'day.
Well, it's
and
nice
he
to
immediately
meet you.
patted down his pockets to make sure I haven't pickpocketed him in any way.
Nice to meet you, Your Majesty. Jenny, these two coronations, 70 years apart, there is a great deal of continuity, of course, through the centuries, in fact, but there were some key differences that Charles wanted. Could you just point out a couple of the most important ones?
Well, first of all, it was the look of it. Back in '53, it was really an ocean of white male faces, all dressed in ermine, with coronets in which they hid their sandwiches because it was going to be such a long session that they needed a little food to keep them going. This time, we did see a much more multicultural congregation, which is what Charles wanted. I think that was typified, really, by the gospel choir. Some of the singers who'd sung at Harry and Meghan's wedding, and I thought they were great because everything else was, to be honest, it was a bit stiff. And suddenly these wonderful people came on and they swayed around and they sang and everyone eased up. So there was that. It was also multi-faith. That was the other big change. The Judaism, the Hinduism, the Sikhism, all that was represented there was really, really significant, and more women. Thank goodness.
Talking of women, Paul, we're told by the British press that the British public have come to accept Camilla. I'm not so sure that's true, but we're told it repeatedly that she, despite what happened with Princess Diana and Prince Charles, but as they were, the British public have come to accept her. Do you believe that?
Well, times have changed, and everyone out there knows that Diana's colours are nailed to my mast and always will be for the rest of my life. So it was a bittersweet moment for me to see Camilla being crowned queen, but we have to accept that, and I think the public have to accept it. And although I don't think she's going to be as visible as previous queens have been, I think she's going to be a queen in the shadows. She's going to be the person that keeps the king on the right track, because knowing him so well, I know he's always had a finger in lots of pies, and she's going to be the one to tell him, no, Charles. Charles has always lived in a world where everyone said yes and no one says no, and if you say no, you're out. But I think Camilla is the one person that has sensibility and common sense, and is the one person that can say no to Charles. Getting back to the public, in my people, the people that follow me, and Diana, no, they will not accept Camilla, of course, because they're all thinking that, well, Diana should have been there. Well, that's not to be, really. We have to move on. We've all moved on in our lives. I've moved on, Camilla's moved on, and Charles has moved on. What is right is that we get the temperature right, and we keep the monarchy, because I am a royalist and I want it to survive.
Kathy, quick question for you. You are friends with Camilla. I've seen pictures with you hugging her and looking at her in a very enthusiastic fashion. You're chummy with her. Is that over now that she's Queen Camilla?
I don't think so. I saw her on Sunday and we had a cuddle and a gossip. And I met her when she was public enemy #1, and her journey's been incredible, to go from the most vilified person in Britain to this complete vindication. And how she endeared herself to me, I met her in the late 80s. I said, how are you surviving the myopic gaze of the media? And she said, well, since she'd been in the public eye, well-meaning American matrons kept sending her their cosmetic surgeon's cards because they couldn't believe she'd go out in public with that weathered visage. And of course, all happened then was it gave her more laughter lines. And if you read between those lines, what you'll see is wit, warmth, intelligence. And as Paul was saying, she will always give the king a right royal laugh. She's got a great sense of humor. So, and, whatever you think about Diana, it is very sad what happened to her. But half of all marriages end in divorce in Britain now. And this is a love story that has passed the test of time. And it's, you can't deny that they are really deeply in love with each other.
Paul, let me ask you about Prince Harry. It's a slightly gossipy question. He was placed in the third row, so he's been relegated, really. Playing no formal part in the ceremony. And I was just wondering what you made of that, because you and him have quite a long history, going back to when he was a child. And then later, when he released his autobiography, Spare, he sort of, in a derogatory fashion, referred to you as nothing more than Mummy's butler. First of all, why did he do that? And then you can tell me about your reaction to him being placed in the third row.
Right. I wish that Prince Harry had come to me and told me that before he put it in a book. But he didn't. It's his right to say whatever he feels and thinks. I'd love to speak with him in private and remind him of what I did for his mother, and the fact that I was the only one there at certain times to look after her and protect her, indeed in life and death. The reason he sat in the third row is, of course, because he's no longer a working member of the royal family, and that's his place. He chose that place. I have to also say to you that my heart broke when Harry walked into the Abbey alone. He looked such an isolated figure. But this is of his doing. He's abandoned his family, his country, and his people, and indeed his duty. So that's his place now, and that's where he will be. I mean, there is no room for reconciliation in the ceremony or in the Abbey. That was never going to happen. And he was always going to turn tail and head straight back to the airport and go back to his wife. I feel very sorry, because he should be standing beside his brother. He should be his brother's wingman. Both those boys should have kissed their father and pledged allegiance to him. And I think it's a great shame.
Okay, let's just stop the chat for 1 second and find out what the people, the public, thought of the coronation. And we sent our producer, Salahuddin, down to St. James's Palace, which is just around the corner from Buckingham Palace, to talk to some royalists. And just before that, he went to Trafalgar Square, where all the Republicans were hanging out.
Not my king! 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 Get a real job! Get a real job! Get a real job!
What's brought you out today?
Sure, well, I'm here for citizenship and democracy. I think it's very anachronistic that we have a monarchy. I do think it's very backwards. And I object to the fact that we're spending hundreds of millions of pounds on this event when we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
I think it's absolutely ridiculous, and that is my money, that is your money, that is the money of all of us that are standing here, and we're spending it on them for what? To keep them pampered. I don't support them, not my king, not my monarchy, and I will never, ever, ever support a crown and a people that will oppress people.
There is people that don't have food and food banks, and you say to enjoy the festival, how?
Yeah. Of course you would want to remove the monarchy, so what would you replace it with?
It would be an
democracy.
Democracy is the right answer. Yeah.
Why are you protesting the coronation, one, and what would you like to replace the monarchy with?
I think I'm here for my grandmothers who really struggled with partition. The generational trauma that they suffered meant that I couldn't just sit on my sofa and enjoy the processions today. I'm very anti-monarchy. They ruined India, they ruined Pakistan.
Hi there, I was wondering what your reaction to the coronation was.
Very wet, but wonderful.
It was amazing. We wouldn't have missed it. We came specially and we stayed the night, which was absolutely wet, as Sammy says, but it was absolutely worth it because we could hear the ceremony over the tannoy as well. So whilst we couldn't see the screens and things, we could actually hear it. So really made it memorable and we could actually go along with it.
How does King Charles keep the monarchy relevant for the next generation?
His charitable work and work to do with the environment and fighting for climate change in particular really helps. I think 20, 30 years ago it was seen as quite weird, but now it's very much the norm, and I think he just needs to carry on going for that, carry on touching like the teens.
He needs to support the same things that young do as well, to sort of like stay close to them.
They bring in a lot of money anyway. Without the royal family, we're a small island that wouldn't be that important. Yes, we're important enough, but it's the royal family that keeps us interesting to people around the world. Whenever royal family go anywhere, trade increases. When diplomats come here, trade increases. So to me, I don't think we'd be anything without royal family.
And what makes the British royal family so special, for example, for an outsider like yourself, coming from...
I think they are the king of kings. Yeah.
So where have you come from today?
Yeah, I come from India.
You come all the way from India to visit?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, what did you make of the coronation you've just witnessed?
We were very, very happy to see the coronation. We saw the large number of crowd, excited.
Switzerland, we have mountains to attract tourists, and England, they have the royal family and all the history.
We flew all the way over here from the United States, and the privilege was unbelievable. This was monumental, monumental, and it was gorgeous.
And it's history in the making.
So amazingly done. Beautiful, just the whole pomp and circumstance.
I think there is a lot of things that went wrong with colonising, and yes, that does need to be visited, that does need to be rectified. There are some items that need to be returned not only to India.
The Kohinoor diamond.
Like the Kohinoor.
Or the Cullinan diamond.
Not only to India, but other respective countries as well. So those things should be, if they are saying we are sorry, then let's see that with action, not just with words.
Let's say one day, within 100 years, that the monarchy is abolished. Do you think Britain would be a poorer place for it?
I think it would be a very, very different place. And also, it's the essence of Britain. Yeah, it's the essence of Britain. Like, I think we would just be, what? It wouldn't be London without the royal family, I don't think.
So the essence of British identity would be lost, basically?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely agree.
Well, a lot of smiling faces there, but also a few disgruntled protesters. Kathy, one of your sons, or one of your children anyway, went down to join the protests. And as we know, 6 of the leaders were arrested. What did he say about the protests?
Well, I was broadcasting outside Buck House, and then I suddenly got a call that one of my kids was about to be arrested at the protest, so that I'd have to leave, not see the fly past, and run down and post bail. But I think it was pretty heavy-handed and outrageous, actually. The protesters were arrested not far from the statue of Charles I, who had his head chopped off for similar repressions. So I think the police have a lot to answer for, and also the Tories who've passed these draconian rules, new rules about how they can quash public demonstrations. So, yeah, that was a very dark stain on the whole coronation, in my view.
Well, do you think that's the case, Jenny? Was it a dark stain? We know that 6 of the protest leaders were arrested, and then the Metropolitan Police put out a statement saying that they regret that those 6 people couldn't have joined the protest. They're obviously admitting to overstep the mark a little bit.
Yep, it was very messy. I suppose it would have been even messier if, as the police, I think, feared paint or something had been thrown over the procession. But it was heavy-handed. And frankly, all the police have done is handed the Republican movement the biggest coup they've had in years, more publicity than they could ever have dreamt of. So I don't think, seriously, they'll be too unhappy about that. But it was messy and foolish.
Paul, would there have been a better way to have dealt with protesters?
But I think it's a great shame that people were arrested and for protesting, because that's our right in the United Kingdom. We live in a democracy, and we are allowed to have a public voice. So, I do think it's a great shame. It's everyone's right. It's not everyone's cup of tea. I understand
concerns,
that.
There were threats ahead of the coronation, perhaps quite vague ones, that people were going to throw sirens or rape alarms underneath the horses. I mean, there were some concerns, genuine concerns.
Yes, I think there was genuine concern that there might have been upset during the coronation. And I was in London, and the police were everywhere. I've never seen so many policemen in one place. And I understand the fact that Meghan didn't come, because she must have been worried too about protests and people throwing eggs or paint or whatever. And that must have been a great concern for Harry, because, as we know, Meghan isn't the most popular woman in the United Kingdom, and I think it was a good thing that she stayed away.
Kathy, just a final question. You're uniquely placed to answer this one, being from Australia. When he became king, he became head of state in 15 countries, didn't he, including this one, from Australia to Jamaica. Do you think Australia is likely to become a republic and get rid of the monarch as head of state?
I think it's pretty much headed that way. I mean, Australia's the most multicultural nation in the world. We're a human minestrone. 1 in every 3 Australians was born overseas. And if you ask young Aussies to bear an allegiance to some, castle-encrusted, corgi-caressing royal family 10,000 miles away, I mean, it doesn't have any resonance with them. Talk to most Aussie kids about the king, and they think you're talking about Elvis Presley from Baz Luhrmann's film. But the one way the king might reach out to the younger generations of Australia is through his environmental concerns, because he's a passionate conservationist, and that does resonate with young people. So we shall see. But at the moment, with a Labor Prime Minister and the whole of mainland Australia now Labor, I think we are moving in that direction.
Jenny, is the monarchy safe in this country, in Britain?
Yeah, I think it's safe in this country, and I think it's slightly ludicrous actually to have your head of state living thousands of miles away, and I think King Charles understands that too. He has said it, his mother said it, his father said it. It's up to each individual country to decide its own destiny, and whatever they decide is fine with the royal family.
Jenny Bond, Paul Burrell, Kathy Lett, thank you all so much for your contributions to the Nexus today. Much appreciated. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. If you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, do go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Till next week then, goodbye.